OOCS into a wider galaxy, Part 201, reports from beyond the stars. She sighs as the moment she enters the room, her cousin's cell phone begins playing the Imperial March. Okay, you can stop that now. Do you find my lack of faith disturbing? He asks. I find your lack of variety disturbing. Seriously, stop writing Star Wars and at least try something else. Like the difference between a weapon designed to intimidate the enemy versus one designed to kill the enemy. Or, I don't know, try to test me as a Cylon or something. Why do you know so much about science fiction? I read up on it on the way back from the wider galaxy, burned the hours good and slow, but I figured I'd be getting more than the big two screamed at me. So far, I'm disappointed. That's hundreds of hours wasted, Emily says. Let's be fair. From what you've told us, there wasn't much else to do during the ride back through. No, there wasn't, she admits. Once you know how things are moving, space can be very empty. It's almost like seeing things coming from literal light years away really lets you dodge things, Emily says. Not that the course and exact speed wasn't perfectly calculated. Kind of spooky that the galaxy at large can be looking at us at any moment, and only can't get here thanks to the null. It's why the scientific and military branches are all having a quiet panic attack, knowing that it's easy to calculate a clear shot to Earth, and literally any number of forces can get just about whatever they want to Earth. But none of their tech would work right, her cousin asks, and Emily smirks. That's not right? It's not. Axiom makes it easier, but it's just a shortcut. They've got more than enough brain power and everything else to knuckle down and get anything they want to us. It's just not normally worth the effort. Unless some random peacock wants two little boys delivered to her, to their father. You can't tell me it wasn't massively fucking creepy that, holy shit, Ben, she just showed up. Get off your cousin, her uncle calls out. Thank you, uncle. And Benny boy, get used to it. We're part of a bigger galaxy. You should have been ready for this since the beacon showed up. She chides her cousin. What do you mean? If they can get a beacon to Earth, they can get a bomb to Earth too. Why else do you think so many governments were able to put aside their nonsense and build together? Before they started trying to wring as much out of it as they could, Emily remarks, and started ripping their own hands off in the attempt. Her cousin notes, want a beer or something? I need to drive home after, so I'll just not even start. Got any soda? How the hell you keep guzzling things and eating more than me while staying that small is a mystery, Ben says as he brings over a cola. He towers over her naturally, but she can and has tossed him around like a frisbee. The fact that I've been keeping up my PT at the standards that saw me shipped out on the Dauntless has a lot to do with it, Emily answers. You're free to join me. I start the day with a gentle 2-mile dash before a soft, gentle 21-handed pull-ups for each arm, and then hanging sit-ups before 100 jumping jacks. You know, just a little something to wake up with. The real work comes after dinner. I'm related to a loony. I'm related to a sloth. Think there are sloth aliens? Yeah, but knowing the way the galaxy is, they're probably as inflated as a pool toy when they're on the slimmer side of things. Emily, Lake, was that envy in your tone? No, it was resentment. Being out in the galaxy makes a normal woman feel too fat and too thin at the same time. It's the kind of evil magic that should get a person burned at the stake. Yes, that envy. Need I remind you what happened the last time you pushed me? Emily asked in a teasing tone. You pulled and I went a good 3 meters up and 6 over. Remember that pansy boy? I need to start training. Getting bullied by my little cousin is just embarrassing. You're embarrassing. I don't like that agreement. Too bad. So they're approved? The Spirit-class parasite shuttles are going to be a thing? Commander Freeman asks as she looks over the new class of training simulator she's going to be installing and overseeing the use of at her base. These Hades-class engines they use are looking like they're going to work, and it's good work that the scientists that shipped out on the Dauntless. Smart stuff. They got their noses into a bit more alien tech, and we've tested these things to the point of madness. The engines can't FTL, but they can use dozens of different materials as fuel with little strain, and are so fuel efficient that the math starts looking runny at the edges. But still holds up. The only downside is that it can't fight too hard against gravity and is useless in atmosphere of any kind. But get past those issues, and these engines can and will make perfect shuttles for asteroid mining and short-range transport in space. We're going to deploy these things to start speeding up the building of our orbital infrastructure. In a few decades, we might have full-on planetary rings developed and actual space elevators instead of the rail and rocket systems we're currently using. I think it's tri-technology, one of the anomalous species, Freeman notes. Considering that each species seems to have separate superpowers, can any of them count as anomalous? Even humanity, with null resistance, endurance, and extreme toxin tolerances, seems to be just as weird. And that's not touching the whole gender thing. Anomalous in that they don't look like they came out of a stripper's parody of science fiction. No, but you could slap the little guys into almost any sci-fi setting, and they'd fit in like they were made for it. That may be true, but as my associate here has apparently lost track of things, I'm going to bring things back to the fact that most of the Hades engine's advancements were based of existing advancements in tri-technology, just applied on a different scale and with some assumptions covered up for. A second scientist says, as such, when we get enough of these in space and a production facility for them up there, we can start maintaining the orbital areas around Earth, keeping them clear and clean, as well as start mining asteroids and comets for even more resources, to say nothing of planetary rings and even smaller moons. The sheer amount available means that once we get this ball rolling, we can and should start building more and more. There is literal and metaphorical gold to be found in space. So much so that gold will quickly become worthless even as a backup currency that preppers like, Commander Freeman notes. Still, that's getting ahead of ourselves. Is there anything unusual I need to be made aware of for these new simulation pods? No weird black box technology that will make gravity twist into a pretzel and then used as a hula hoop? What are you on, and where might a law-abiding citizen acquire some? I've been reading the reports again. We have people that 4 years ago were normal, if fit, trainees that are now literally atomizing things at a touch, teleporting across entire worlds in bending probability until they become the kind of good luck creature that a casino owner would scream themselves into a coma at the mere idea of. And I'm willing to bet that the next report will prove that to be the tamer stuff. We'll probably hear about robot overlords, giant space monsters, or ancient gods who have foreseen our coming since the Stone Age. You really think it will go that far, Commander Freeman? If it hasn't already, I'd be shocked. The fact of the matter is that with all the oddness of the wider galaxy, we need to start preparing for just about anything to show up. Even if we're in the middle of a death zone, we're still in reach of anyone with the means. Do you expect an attack or something, Commander? I think it would be stupid not to expect one, but that's not what I'm going at. What I'm saying is that the galaxy is weird and wide and now aware of us. I don't know how long until that weirdness comes here, and if we have better space infrastructure, then we'll be better able to handle whatever kind of weirdness is coming, Freeman says. So I'm not the only one that caught that interesting aside that some aliens thought it was impossible to have full-on matter in cruel space, let alone life. The alien equivalent of a flat earther believing that null dissolves physical matter on top of disrupting their axiom-based physiology, as if the stars and celestial bodies in our part of the galaxy weren't visible to the naked eye, let alone the assisted one. Freeman says before thinking, we're only starting with 3 of these training pods I see. Can you bring up the blueprints again? Are these double-seated? Triple, actually, the middle seat is to rest while the right seat pilots and the left operates any tools or sensor equipment. Or learns on a low-risk assignment. That will work. How are the final shuttles going to bring things around? That depends on the final modal. We've got one here that's designed to use drone arms to grab and manipulate things, another with a dedicated airlock and suits. With one shuttle holding things still and the other bringing in technicians, we have a solid repair and salvaging team working. After that, the reinforced prows of the shuttles means they can basically push things around with their noses. Which means that they're going to have a wide profile designed to catch things. Currently, so much for spaceships being sleek-looking things. These Spirit shuttles are going to make your average refrigerator look like it can fly by comfort. Like the Dauntless class is any better? Those things look like medieval weapons minus the handle. And I'm not even joking. I think there's a whole class of mace that looks a lot like them. Maybe if you stretched out the head over the entire handle, it would look like a flanged mace. But I do see your point. There's not a lot of elegance in spaceships. They are chunky monsters most of the time. Aerodynamics. Only a thing when there's a lot of air, go figure, the scientist says, which is why most planes look like bullets with wings. Not the most graceful things out there. You know, if you round out the profiles of most birds, they all look pretty goofy in flight. God forbid we start basing our ships after geese or the like. How about a booby then? What? The blue-footed booby? Why not build a ship based off that profile? All right, is today's pre-flight check looking good? He asked from his well-cushioned and properly supportive pilot seat. Greens across the board, the rails are in acceptable tolerances and all signs point to go. Launch in T-10 at the pilot's go. Go, he states. Go received. Beginning countdown to launch. Base command says, and he grins to himself. The endless checklists are boring, but so worth it for not only this moment, but for what happens after. The countdown reaches 0, and the sheer inertia pushes him back in the seating. But he's braced as reality is punched, and he is shot into the sky. 3 minutes. It used to take 8.5 to reach orbit with massive rockets. Now it takes 3 with a glorified delivery truck. Hell yeah. 3, 2, 1. He counts down alongside the ship before adjusting the controls to modify the angle of flight ever so. Station Section Alpha 2. This is your supply run. Apologies for the delay. Safety is paramount after all. Over. Copy that supply. Good to have you, Station Control says, and he grins. Anything special this run, Lieutenant Durant? They've starting to install new training pods, which tells me that they've greenlit the Spirit-class parasite craft. They're jumping on things nice and fast. Learning that we have literally countless eyes staring at us tends to do that. I'm engaging maneuvering thrusters now. Confirm shuttle approach vector. Your approach is within tolerable drift range. We will be activating magnetic tether in T-150 seconds at current velocities. Confirm station command. Alert me if there are any deviations from standard procedure. He calls in. Copy that supply. See you soon. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 202. Reports from Beyond the Stars. Hey, Supply, good to see you. He's greeted as he pulls himself through the airlock. The astronaut on the other side was someone he had brought up last month, and he gives the man a grin as he orients himself in a place where up is a subjective thing. Good to be seen, Jackie. This is a bit more than a delivery today. I've also been... Yeah, we've shifted some of the samples from the bribe so you can bring it down. Jackie replies, and he snorts again at the reminder of the name of the ship. It was flat out called the bribe. The sheer audacity of the alien woman. Granted, when you can casually drop more wealth than half the nations of a planet have, then why bother hiding anything, right? I've also got a passenger, right? Alvin's packed in helping with the unloading of supplies and gear. So what are we bringing from that massive political shitstorm in the moon's orbit? Some sealed samples of axiom-dependent flora for study, a tri-tight samples, gold, a bevy of devices, all requiring axiom to work, but have recorded retrofitting methods that mostly work. Mostly. Scanners don't do so well with the wrong energies in and around them. Go figure, Jackie says. No kidding? They also freak out when you get them too close to a person. They register trace adrenaline in the system and the adrenal glands as combat-grade stimulants and stomach acid as a serious safety hazard. Fun, what do they think of food? Get them near anything even mildly spicy or minty, and they start setting off all kinds of warnings. What about something spicy and minty? Oh, those do not go together. I know. But how do they respond when both are mixed? Like, say, putting a bit of toothpaste in a container and mixing in hot sauce. Haven't done that yet. The hardcore experiments are to be done on the ground. Fair. Any news you want to share about the experiments happening up here in orbit? Well, the trees are adjusting oddly well. They grow up to the light and send the roots down the right way. So plants seem to have it figured out that they're supposed to have two sides to them. But we're getting some really round apples. How round? If not for the ends, they'd be spheres. It's really neat. And other plants, If you can keep the plant in a rotational growing pot, then pretty much all of them do very well. Spin to win, as the gamers say. Good to know. How do they taste? Ask again next week. They're nearly done. Jackie says, then brings him close. Donna, did you bring it? Yes, he says, pulling out a small vacuum-sealed package and passing it to him. It's bright bubblegum blue and with a bit of gray and a series of white triangles. You didn't get it from me? Thanks, man. Get out of here and get yourself an alibi, Jackie tells him before giving him a push back to send him slowly drifting to the next segment, clearly intending for him to help with the offloading of the remaining supplies for the alibi. Not that he needs one. It's not like B brought a bomb or anything. No one's going to do anything with the stuff he's smuggled in. Honestly, he gave them all to Commander Freeman and got the go-ahead for this. The only way he could be more blatant is if he carried a box that said smuggled goods on the side to bring them all up. Everyone wants some treats that aren't on the normal menu, and shy of the ones that might be a problem, people are okay with this. With the way the rails work, it's maybe $5 to $6 extra power to seriously make the people in space feel a lot more comfortable. Sure, smuggling is normally bad, but people getting treats they think they had snuck in just for them is worth its weight in blood. He also had several pounds of candy bars, a few paperback books and magazines, and a very specific type of jerky. Also puffed peas for some reason. He has questions for that man. Although granted, the answer is probably vegan. The door isn't heavy, nothing here really is, but it has a lot of mass and takes a moment to pull open. It was a deliberate system just in case one part of the station was compromised. Letting a single hole kill everyone is irresponsible after all. Hey Don, how are you? One of the researchers asked. Good to have the supplies topped off. Hey Jane, you seen Alvin? I need to know from him that he's ready to get out of here, Don asks, and Jane jerks her thumb to the airlock that leads into the back of his shuttle. Yeah, they're in there going over everything before bringing it in. You know, preloading. Do you have it? Jane asked before receiving a plastic baggie filled to bursting with mass-produced chocolate bars. She slips it under her shirt. How the hell did you deviants make me into a smuggler? Some people are just born for buccaneering, Jane says before grinning at him. Besides, I think you'd look good in a vest. I'm married. Don't you know the way of the galaxy? She teases him. Not the way of Earth. We're not on Earth. If you can clearly see it with the naked eye, then we're basically on it. He counters, pointing to the entrance to the cupola module. Right, well, they should be just about finished in there. Hard to believe there's such little trust and so much fear of smuggling. Report writers love to feel important, Don says before gently tossing himself through the air, and after a slow rotation, he catches himself on the wall and taps on the transparent portion of the airlock. He waves at the trinity of crew members going over the cargo, and they wave back. Sir, once again, it's like his telomeres have been restored. No sign of mutation or anything. Copying this youth technique is beyond us. It's like someone just took his epigenetic clock and turned it backwards. More than that, his family has a history of being prone to several types of cancer, liver and stomach most prominently. That is gone now. The risk is not zero, but compared to the rest of his family, effectively is zero. As it stands, a newly born babe of his family has a good chance of dying before him. He is a supremely healthy young man. All the more important we replicate the miracle that was performed on him. If it truly is him, we have confirmed it, sir, up and down, left and right. In every capacity, we are able to check to see if a person is still themselves he has passed. Everything but visual inspection. He's lost 20 years of life. He's 9, physically 9 years old when he should be about to enter his 30s. I'm sorry, sir. Whatever was done, it left no trace. There is no foreign chemical, radiation, or gland in his system. Whatever they used was completely used up and covered, its trail on the way out. Between all the agents that came back younger, there's over 100 years just gone. And according to the reports, there's even more missing, to say nothing about the elderly civilians that were released into the wider galaxy. Yeah, the Jon Guice sent one of their relics. If the pattern holds true and they return, they will be young and vibrant again. Will he return? Will any of them? This one is different. They know that there will be terrible consequences if they do not. The first too firm a touch was used. So much wealth was waved in front of them, it could only have been seen as a trap. We must be more cautious, more careful. With the expansions of technology, it is becoming both easier and harder to control the herds. But controlled they must be. They are too ignorant to understand what is needed for their own betterment. Jesus Christ! Someone screams, and Dawn, along with Alvin, Gary, and Fiona, come flying out of the cargo hold to see what's going on just before another astronaut swims through the air between them with a bright blue and gray shark swimming after him. How did you even get that on the station? Alvin demands Jackie as the man wiggles through the air in the shark-shaped sleeping bag he's crammed himself into. There are gales of laughter as Jackie pokes his head out with a smile too big for his face but completely sincere. You should have heard the screams. They were too good. Ah ha 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 ha. Jackie gales out as he drifts through the air in his stylized sleeping bag before the first astronaut, Vincent, comes flying back in with a tackle. Dawn has a grip on a handle and grabs Vincent by the back of the shirt so that Jackie can get away. Okay, that's enough. It was harmless and it was goofy, but unlike the rest of you who can eat the evidence, he is now going to have a hell of a time getting rid of a shark-shaped sleeping bag. God damn it, as if the gorilla suit incident wasn't bad enough. Now we have sharks. Give it time. You'll get tigers and bears too at this rate, Don says with a grin. Supply pilot Donovan Creed, please refrain from smuggling in things like that. Too late, Don says, and Vincent turns to look at him in shock. What? Sorry, Don says, passing him 3 weeks' worth of gardening magazines. Oh no. They're lying in wait, Vincent says in a pained tone. I swear to God, I'm the only actual professional here some days. Hey, don't rat us out like... Fiona begins, and he holds up her newest romance novel that has a man with an 8-pack with perfect bronze skin, wearing only a cowboy hat on the cover. Shutting up now. That's right, I'm the guy with the goods, so you're all my... Don begins to say before a phone on the wall starts ringing. Fiona answers it and listens for a moment. She then gives off a nasty grin and holds it out to Don. Hello, Commander Freeman. I see our regular ritual is still on track. I should be able to set time by how long it takes you to call the crew of the space station your bitches. I think you meant to say, I should not be able to set time by this. He corrects her. You know, I used to think the idea of a space scoundrel or space pirate to be absurd. Thank you for teaching me otherwise. And inform the crew that paintball guns, airsoft guns, and BB guns are still going to end up with you in the brig if I see any of them in that station. Commander Freeman tells him and he nods. Did everyone catch that? Don asks, and there's some nodding. We got it loud and clear, Commander. Anything else? Yeah, if you want to keep pushing things, remember that the rails can be used to launch missiles too. What about Nerf? Still banned, and don't even ask about bootleg, Commander Freeman says. That said, good on you for keeping spirits up and fighting back against any form of cabin fever. It was a real problem on the Dauntless. Captain, good to see you, her crewman says as she takes her seat at the table. Good to be seen. There's a lot going on, isn't there? Something like that. They're half done trying to parse out the differences between Tret and human DNA, one of them says. And how's that going? Emily asks. Already done. But they're redoing it because it's so very, very close. The problem is that it came from a variety of Tret with naturally blue hair. It doesn't match up to anything human, but is undoubtedly human. But it also has certain sequences just missing if they're not relegated to junk strains. Sequences missing or deactivated, think they'll try to clone one. Clone a creature that literally cannot survive in its adult form in this part of the galaxy? What could possibly go wrong? Well, considering it's going to just be dead meat the entire time, it can't go too wrong. And now you jinxed it. We're up for a zombie apocalypse now. What? That's boring. Let's triple down. I want the gates of hell to open so I can get a necklace of demon teeth and ears, he says, putting down his drink. I predict that things will go perfectly. There is a 0% chance of failure and absolutely no way this can go wrong whatsoever. Well, Murphy, my man, The gauntlet has been thrown. Er, Okay, fuck all of you, I am not bad luck, Sergeant Murphy Ford says as he puts down his own drink. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 203, Reports from Beyond the Stars. All right, samples secured and effects stored. Alvin, you ready for this? Don asks his passenger. Ready and waiting, I need to take shit without a vacuum involved yesterday. Hopefully you're not being literal. I do not envy the janitors otherwise. I can hold it, Alvin says, and Don points to the fresher. No, no more vacuum. You're at least wearing a diaper? No, I'm not going on a spacewalk. I will never let you forget if you shit yourself. I can hold it, so long as we set out sometime today, Alvin says. Fine, Don says as he finishes strapping himself in. Station Control, this is Supply. We are requesting clearance to disengage and return to Earth. Copy that, Supply. We are cycling the airlocks at your go. Don looks to Alvin, who nods. Go. We are locked in and ready to drop, Don says as Alvin finishes buckling up. Copy that. Cycling airlocks now. Station Control says, and after a few moments, the slight sounds of the station slowly mute as the air between the doors vanishes, and only the slight vibrations where the shuttle is connected to the station still. Then there is a slight clanking sound as the connection from the cargo bay is disengaged, and then the main airlock is let go too. Releasing final clamps, Don says, and then at his command, there are several slight clangs as the magnets power down, and then the shuttle starts drifting. And we are free. See you when I bring the next one up, Don says, and slowly angles the engines and gives off a controlled burn down to the planet below. There is a slight falling sensation as they receive another communication from below. Supply Shuttle Alpha. We have been alerted by the station that you're on your way. Be advised the wind has kicked up and you will be fighting the turbulence, Commander Freeman says. Copy that, ground control. I am alert and ready for the wind, Don says. Just get here safe. Lives over everything. Message received, Don says as the first few effects of re-entry kick off and fingers of thin plasma start licking the underside of the shuttle. The deorbit burn is a pyroclastic show of orange and yellow flames, and he curves the shuttle to keep things in the proper position. The shuttle is much too fragile to just slam down through the atmosphere, so a gentle corkscrew down to burn off excess momentum, in possibly the most literal version of the metaphor to exist, is required. Woo! You're lucky that you don't spend more than a couple hours in orbit per visit. Feeling your everything resettle to having gravity again is not pleasant. Well, I'll take your and everyone's word on it. Yeah, this is pretty much the required conversation at this point, Alvin says as they continue to spiral, and then the spiral turns into a glide. Hey, little traditions are important, Don remarks as he eyes the storm forming below. Dark clouds. Ground control. I'm seeing some aggressive-looking weather down there. Has any lightning been spotted? Negative, but the clouds are... Commander Freeman begins to say before far below the clouds light up and there's a crack of thunder. All right, I'm retracting the arrays and aligning the shields. We'll be taking a little longer through a thunderstorm. Thunders now, it's cold, Commander Freeman says, and there's an almost involuntary chuckle out of Don. Stop digging, you've already hit oil, Don says with a grin as he can hear the communication arrays pull in, leaving only the most hardened emergency arrays external to the small shuttle. There is no longer the bandwidth to speak, just text gets through. A single word is sent. Continue. He nods as Alvin grips the sides of his seat and Don angles his shuttle to go through the storm itself. With all the delicate equipment under their shields, there is no more danger from the lightning. The first bolt doesn't slam into the shuttle. The entire thing is properly built. The energy is redirected and diverted away. No matter where the energy strikes the craft, it is whisked away and returns to the storm without issue. The small ship starts to shake, and Don smirks as Alvin gives him a tight grin. How many storms have you flown through? Honestly, I haven't bothered counting, Don says as streaks of power flash over the frontal view screen, and Alvin suppresses a flinch. Nothing to be worried about. Passenger planes built by the lowest bidder, and with so many corners cut, their circles can take lighting. It's powerful. But it can only hurt you if you're not ready for it. And we are more than ready. Right. Alvin takes a breath. It's shockingly peaceful in space. You forget how easily you can be surprised. I imagine as the station gets bigger and bigger, it'll be harder for it to be so predictable. Once it's big enough, we might even have permanent residents. That'll be a thing to see. Anyone who does that might never, Alvin begins to say before pausing as they break through the bottom of the storm cloud. Damn. This can't be your first time. Can it? I swear I brought you down during a storm before, Don asks as he adjusts the shuttle ever so slightly. Number, you haven't. Oh, well, just relax. I've done this so many times that short of spontaneous human combustion, it has nothing that can surprise me. So you can be surprised, Alvin says, and Don gives him an even look as he adjusts the flight a little more to play into the crosswinds and use them to smooth the ride and conserve fuel. Unless you start burning, the answer is no, Don says with an easy grin. The United Nations session had devolved into debate between its representatives again. It was routine at this point, and while very little officially got done, there were many interesting conversations happening between the representatives. So the inevitable is likely mostly finished in its task. If there has been no expansion of the Undaunted since the last message, which is an IF so large it has its own gravitational pull, that was with the assumption it had grown by 50%. I think you're off by at least a few decimal positions. Likely if things are kept to the level of just instances where humans are involved, it is potentially halfway done, if we're including travel time, and the verification process, which is likely very varied depending on the area, which means we'll likely be crewing the Indomitable as the inevitable is returning through cruel space. It's nearly finished and we're undergoing our final testing on it as we speak, which means the infinite. We only have the basic outer shell built, and mostly through the supplies provided by Lady Tickenped. Our bribe has enough base resources to build a 10-strong fleet of Dauntless-class vessels, to say nothing of the medical samples, flora, fauna, and cultural replicas on that nightmare floating by the moon. If you had told me a year ago my biggest headache would be too much money and resources, I would have called you a liar. Now it's a very real issue. Thankfully, a full third of it has been easily redirected into further Dauntless-class ships and potential upgrades. Do you think these Fleetheart models will be worthwhile? It's intriguing, using a Dauntless-class ship to slowly put together the infrastructure for a self-sustaining fleet? Fascinating. And if what we've learned of the outer galaxy, not an odd thing to do. There are, reportedly, countless communities made entirely of traveling ships, free fleet-born, the men and women born on the axiom lanes of the galaxy. There is a certain appeal to all that, a sense of adventure. Yes, but the Fleetheart project, that's not designed for a merchant fleet. It's designed for a war fleet. No, it's for any kind of fleet provided you have the blueprints to upload to the scaffolding. It has upgraded communication towers, production lines for support craft designed to harvest resources, refineries for those resources, and the tools to build mobile scaffolding for the production of proper vessels. Those vessels can be anything from warships to trade ships. We have ship models of all sorts, but most require exotic resources that do not emerge in null-dense areas, such as our patch of the galaxy. There is also the concern as what to do with the resource at our own disposal. How do we expand past Earth? Build on another world? Duh. Okay, wise guy. To what nation does that colony belong? What kind of citizenship does its newly born natives have? What do we tax it and how do we enforce it? Say it breaks away from its parent nation peacefully. What do we do about visas and passports? Now say this colony builds its own colony. What then? Do we grandfather citizenship? Say it covers an entire moon or planet? Does that nation own an entire celestial body? To say nothing of what happens when we can't agree. We're in New York, America. You know, the successfully broken away colony that became its own nation through war. What happens when, not if, when the moon people want to make their own decisions, or the Martians or Venusians or whatever we call the people living on other planets? We can't forget the more roaming people, Representative Engel from Germany adds, the galaxy outside of our little black forest may be tragic when it comes to their wandering citizens, but we won't have the communications necessary for it. How can we tell a fleetborn from a terrorist who's put on a fake mustache, as it were? I was hoping to ask you, your nephew, cousin? A relative of yours is effectively free fleetborn from how much he's moving around. He is, and he's my nephew. A little boy I remember being small enough to sit on my shoulder as I tell him silly stories is now officially a free fleetborn, on top of being an undaunted and a German citizen. She says with a faraway look in her eyes. Is there something we should be made aware of? He's had to use gas weapons. Oh? He used them on monsters too terrible that looking directly upon them can cause a man to bleed. He has waded through utter darkness where bones walked, forded through blood up to his knees, and witnessed an entire moon be reduced to a burning plume of purple flame. He said it was a good few days, she says. You're afraid for him. He is living a life I can barely understand, Representative Engel says sadly. To make matters worse, his foray into raw horror was just the start. He's faced the sort of things that would scar our world for generations. So you believe the reports? I know my nephew. He wouldn't lie about the things he reported about. Official policy is to wait for Observer Wu to return. But I believe. Any other disagreements with official policy? You first, my good Ethiopian. I believe that we need to up-arm now. It will be expensive. It will raise global tensions. But as many have pointed out, a society that can get ships into our orbit or probes to our world can get bombs here too. We need a way to spot incoming threats and potentially intercept, including for things like asteroids, comets, or even rogue planets. Rogue planets? You've been watching some odd movies. Melancholia, a very depressing watch. But we do owe it to ourselves and our people to gird ourselves against not only potential outside aggression, but against any force of nature that might come by and kill us. We have the means to do so on a massive scale now, but we need to find the will to do it. Political will is important. Your turn now, the representative says, and Engel smirks. That was it, honestly. There are living things between stars. We don't know if a comet or asteroid coming for Earth is actually that, or the egg of some kind of monster. We need to be able to look at these things, sort out which ones are danger, and shoot down the ones that are. We basically live in a dark forest and haven't bothered to build a damn fence around our yard. Who knows what might come in, Representative Engel explains, and her Ethiopian counterpart nods. To say nothing of the fact it could be argued we barely have walls, let alone a proper door. Yes, indeed. We need more than the metaphorical equivalent of a small tent in bear country. Perhaps not bear country, but I agree. Even with cruel space giving us breathing room, it's clear we've been noticed, and the Ethiopian representative begins to say before everyone turns. Looks like the argument is dying down. It has been good to speak with you, Miss Germany. And you as well. Testoler 76 concluded, no alterations to material labeled as tritite. Molecular structure, unchanged. Still consistent with iron. Nearly identical with only the unusual blue hue as a distinguishing differential. Source and cause of blue coloration, still unknown. Reported unusual properties, still unseen at this point, the scientist says before sighing and standing away from the microscope. And that's that. I've hit this stuff with every wavelength of laser I can, frozen and fried it as thoroughly as possible, run so many volts and amps through it that I need to check my notes on how many times I did that. It's iron. Every test says it's damn iron, but it's sky freaking blue. The color alone should have been solved by now, but I have no idea what it is. I'm stumped. How and why it's blue. To say nothing of its supposed properties is just not something I can figure out today. Not something I can figure out today because I am tired, I am upset, and I need to leave the lab before I break something. Dr. Patterson, her assistant asks. Yes? She asks. You said it's nearly identical with only the blue hue as a distinguishing differential, right? Yes. But blue is a result of certain rays of light being reflected. Yes. And lasers on all known spectrum didn't make a difference, right? Where are you going with this? Well, sorry, never mind. If you think it's too stupid to say just write it down, I'm open for anything at this point, she says. Well, I was just thinking that if we can't figure it out from this angle, why not another? We have a lot of tritite samples, so why not destroy some? Mix them with iron until you can't tell them apart, and then see at what point it's acting more one way or another. It's already on the list, but we have a long list to still go through. Sorry to say, kid, but lab work is like this. Long, boring, and you keep going through it each day until you run out of time, run out of patience, or find something. So mixing them with iron, sometime next week. We still have to dissolve it, use magnets to fiddle with it, try and see if we can't make it sing, and a few more different tests to get through. Make it sing. Never had wind chimes or seen xylophones before. Oh. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 204, Reports from Beyond the Stars. All right, beginning this next round of testing of the substance known as tritite. It is functionally identical to iron as best can be surmised. However, it is inexplicably sky blue in colorization. This colorization can be altered by the application of heat, but it reverts back to its sky blue state when allowed to cool once more. Noticeably, it glows red and orange at the same temperature that iron does, and for all intents and purposes appears to be iron, despite its reported qualities of providing a near-perfect resistance to the energy known as axiom to the wider galaxy. Dr. Patterson notes, as she looks over at her testing station of two thin bars, one of iron and one of tritite, hanging from hooks thanks to a small hole drilled in each with a small hammer next to them. Behind them is a high-yield microphone that's hooked up to the computer she's at currently. This similarity is at the molecular level and atomic level. At every level, it is constant from the number of protons, electrons, and neutrons to the crystalline and lattice structures of the material. The melting and boiling points are identical, and against acids it provides identical resistances. If one were to disregard its odd blue colorization, it would be completely identical to iron in all respects. However, even the most cursory of visual inspections shows us that it is not iron. My assistant, Mr. Renault, will be aiding in this next test. We will be seeing the resonation differences between a small ingot of iron and a tritite ingot of equal dimensions with a small hammer. Both ingots are hanging off of hooks to allow them to resonate when struck. As a personal aside, I do not think this test will... Dr. Patterson continues before going back and deleting the last few seconds of the audio log. Regardless of personal opinion, the unusual substance must be tested in all regards so that a full and thorough understanding of its properties may be gained. So do I strike it now? Renault asks, and Dr. Patterson holds up a finger before putting it to her lips and slowly increasing the yield on the microphone directly behind the two ingots. She then nods and points to the iron ingot. Renault gives the small ingot a hit with the hammer, and the sound wave is registered on the computer Dr. Patterson is at. She saves it as the control and then indicates the tritite ingot. Renault strikes it, and then Dr. Patterson frowns. She turns off the microphone. Did you hit the tritite differently? Not that I'm aware of, Renault answers. I see. We need to take out that potential variable. Otherwise, this difference will not mean anything. So there is another difference? It did almost. Maybe. We need to be sure, though. She cuts him off and he nods. All right, so we need a consistent striking mechanism. That's not hard to rig up. Maybe a half hour if we really take our time. Let's be sure to get this right. We should have done this from the start. Well, we're doing it now. It's not exactly hard to put in a small note that the initial test wasn't as thorough as the preceding ones. See? Told you. Easy as. And he's sprinting for the bathroom. Don notes as he steps off the shuttle and Alvin rushes past him. He then crosses his fingers and hopes for it to be occupied and for there to be... Damn it, it's free. Pilot Donovan, a few minutes, Commander Freeman says from his left, and he nods. It must be important if she's come to him and not just asked him to head to her office. Of course, I didn't spot any issues with the descent, and it was as smooth as can be in a thundersnow. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, and for you that might be what's wrong. You just gave us a textbook landing. The problem is that we don't have a proper textbook. Meaning it has to be written. By me. By us. So you and me are going to be spending a few days together, especially when the visibility is this bad, and hammer things out. Our facility may be one of the first in the world, but it's not going to be the last, and one day we'll have places like this on other worlds. Until we have a cheap way of doing something better, of course. Of course, so first things first, we should start going over the basic terms and ideas on things. To say nothing of a chapter on what constitutes a proper amount of smuggling. The day gardening magazines, candy bars, and goofy sleeping bags actually cases damage to that station is the day I pay for it out of pocket. And I have no doubt that the amount of damage would be the sort of thing I can pay out of pocket. People need their creature comforts. Only a soulless idiot forgets that kind of thing. Yes, which is why it needs to go in the textbook, because a lot of soulless idiots grasp at positions of power whenever they can. True, although those kinds of people will likely want a professional to confirm that smuggling small things is harmless, so we might need to scare up a psychologist. You could start screaming about having issues with your mother. That usually brings them running. Commander Freeman says with a smirk. I'm missing a joke, aren't I? My cousin is studying psychology. She's so deep in Sigmund Freud that I almost dread my mother after talking to that girl. Perhaps someone a bit more graduated, maybe? Don suggests as Albin steps out of the bathroom down the hall with a huge and clearly theatrical sigh of relief. I think that's a good idea. All right, attempt number 2 on resonation test of tritite as compared to iron. We have assembled a small pneumatic device that when activated will strike the iron, while setting up the next strike for the tritite using compressed air. This is to maintain a completely uniform striking force and angle with each strike, Dr. Patterson says, and her assistant nods. We are now activating the microphone and then the striking device twice to test the frequency in which tritite deviates from iron. If any, she activates the microphone and nods to Renault, who presses the button on the small device they rigged up. Ring! It chimes out cheerfully before quickly quieting down. It's on a hook, after all, not much room for vibration. Renault then activates the device again. Ring! Both of them look at each other without saying a word. The tritite is very clearly making a shorter ringing sound. Dr. Patterson saves the results and then nods to him again. Ring! Ring! It's unchanged. Ring! 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 For 20 minutes straight, they gather the sample of the difference between the tritite and iron before deactivating the microphone. Renault lets out a large breath of air. You didn't need to hold your breath, Dr. Patterson says in an amused tone. I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to taint the data, Renault says. So it's not ringing as long. The iron rings for 1.3 seconds. The tritite is 1.1 seconds of resonation at the longest, averaging at 1 second. Dr. Patterson says with her eyes outright sparkling as she thinks. It's in contact with the axiom. I don't know how, but even right now it's physically in contact with axiom. It's why the mineral is colored blue despite being basically iron. It's in physical contact with the axiom in such a way that it's altering the photonic wavelengths coming off it into the blue spectrum, and it's enough of a physical contact to muffle vibrations on it noticeably faster than standard iron, which means it's way more than just light hitting it. You can shine whatever color light on iron you want. It's always going to ring the same. That's correct. But is it correct for tritite? I'll go see if we have differently colored light bulbs, Renault says, turning before stopping. Doctor, do you think that the reason the resonation is different is because the tritite is contacting axiom or because it's contacting null? That is a very good question, but not one we can answer on Earth, Dr. Patterson says before pausing and smiling at the idea that she just said that in complete and total seriousness. However, we can collaborate with alien scientists once we streamline our communications with the outer galaxy a touch, and sometimes I well and truly love my life. We are living in the age where science fiction is real. Now, if you'll excuse me, I know where to get some red-hued bulbs. The rest will take some sleuthing. Why do you know where red is, specifically? Dr. Patterson asks. He just turns and smiles at her. You've been to a sex shop, haven't you? I have an active social life, and an adventurous one, too. I'll be back with at the very least, Shagadelic read. How about you go to Home Depot and ask for some help before you make me write down Shagadelic in a serious scientific report? Fine. Do you miss it? Emily asks as she walks along. A little. I came back to Earth because I had a girl waiting here for me. Walked back in the room when she had another man dick deep in her, Murphy says in a tone that's forcibly bland. But there's bitterness underneath. I'm shocked that hasn't been in the news cycle. Part of the court settlement on the official breakup. I don't go to the press about it, and she takes only her personal things out of my house and life. She tries for anything else, and the whole world hears about how I passed up a galaxy of desperate supermodels for her, and she repaid me by fucking a walking STD factory. Last I heard, she legally changed her name and left the country. Shit, I'm sorry to hear that. I've worked my way through 3 punching bags and a quarter-ton of ammunition to vent. I'm fine. Also, she got the clap from her bad decisions. It hurt, but it was a bullet dodge as far as I'm concerned. Thinking of heading out again for better prospects? Emily teases. Only if I can't find a woman who understands the meaning of loyalty. I don't want to cross hundreds, if not potentially thousands of light years to find someone, Murphy says. So your name really was an indicator, one of the men says. And you can go fuck yourself, Murphy replies offhandedly. Well, so long as you don't start looking at me for it, you're cute for a grunt, but grounded or not, I'm still your captain. It's kind of incesty to date your crew. You're like my accident-prone and ridiculously reckless grown-up babies. I can't tell if that's flattering, heartwarming, or if I should smack you in the back of the head for that, Murphy says. Sure thing, sonny boy, Emily replies. Seriously, though, if they come to us for crewing or, God forbid, commanding a Dauntless-class vessel, would you? Murphy asks. Because it's me. It depends on the mission. And what kind of mission would you be up for? Fleet building. A soaring admiral in the stars? Hell yes, Murphy says. Considering that you're an okay communications officer at best, I doubt that you will get anywhere. Emily snarks. I can be trained. That's right, but they'll need some kind of treat to get you to do it. What, you don't think my paycheck is enough for me? Yes, but only if you remember that you need to use the money to get the treats yourself. Emily teases him and then slides away from a swing. Ring, ring. Under the red light, the pattern is the same. Ring, ring. The light keeps changing, but the tones stay the same. Well, it was a bit of a long shot, but it is good to exhaust things, Dr. Patterson says. So we know that the tritite is touching something in some way, but not in any capacity we can currently detect. But it is distinct from iron, and it is in contact with something. Therefore, if we keep poking at it, we can detect, measure, and possibly manipulate axiom and null from within cruel space. And this is from tritite alone, the most common and readily available axiom affecting substances. Bar a living entity that evolved to use axiom, Renault adds. Debatable. Tritite is just that common but just that useful, Dr. Patterson says. Still, if this is what we get from tritite, what are the other axiom resonating materials going to teach us? Teach us? All we've learned is that we have physical substances that touch the axiom, even here in cruel space. Provided, of course, our theories pan out. That's big. Imagine if we could remove the null from an area and perform a healing coma here. We could cure aging. We could reliably clone near anything at a fast clip. There's an enormous benefit to things. How would you like to see mammoths, smilodons, or other extinct animals in your lifetime? A great deal. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 205. The Buzz on the Spin. So this is the central control of the station? Observer Wu asks as he is shown into the main area. The large walkway along the outside with numerous terminals in the walls, doorways to different sections and offices. Many desk-style terminals with people working at them to ensure that everything goes smoothly and all in a dark green that reminds him vaguely of a half-dozen different science fiction properties all at the same time. I suppose that serialized science fiction had to get some things right. They do indeed, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, Demon says, moving by. I was coming up here to speak with all of you, including you. Observer Wu states, and Demon turns to show he has a small little bunny-eared boy with 4 arms in his arms. And who is this? This, sir, is Leparian Dunkel. The poor boy was kidnapped several weeks back and escaped, but had no idea how to call home or do anything more than hide and steal snacks where he could. A relative of his is actually on station while trying to look for him, so I'm heading out to make sure a family reunion goes nice and smooth, Demon says. Is this common? It's station policy for the administrators not to start trouble elsewhere. That way, if trouble comes for us, we can just surrender. Whoever thought causing enough trouble to have a fleet show up after them was a good idea. Preserves the station with a minimum of fuss. Everyone doing all sorts of crazy schemes to make money here. And rental fees gives us an absolute hoard of cash to skim from the top, and everyone's happy. Well, an interesting answer, it's not a proper one. Is this a common affair? Kidnapping is and isn't common. You need to remember that we're between multiple different empires, each with their own politics, laws, and tensions. We're a neutral port between it all, so a lot of bad behavior comes through here. It's very regular, but considering the amount of people going through, it's also not. There's maybe 2–3% of a higher chance of getting kidnapped here or finding a kidnapping victim here. But with how many people that is, we trip over this kind of drama almost daily, Demon admits. Anyways, I'm heading down to Sector 4, and as a more unusual answer to your earlier question, this sort of thing is common enough that Daniel has borderline ordered us to use his mother's restaurant as a neutral ground for peaceful handoffs. He wants to scare up more business for her. That is both sweet and a very petty abuse of power, Observer Wu notes and Demon shrugs. He reimburses everything, so it's pretty minor at worst. Not to mention it's an area he can control. I should be back within the hour at the latest, no matter what happens. Plenty of time for you to interview the other men on the station and get their opinions. Demon assures him and Observer Wu nods. Yes, very well. Best of luck, Observer Wu says and Demon nods. Thank you, sir. Now if you'll excuse me, one quick question before you go. Observer Wu stops him. Sir, if you could return to Earth, would you? If I could? I don't know. I will not abandon the duties and responsibilities I have taken up to follow the ones that were stripped from me by the thoughtlessness of others. But I do miss my family back home. The Ito family was never the richest or the biggest, but we stuck together. Unfortunately, if I go back after everything, I'm likely to find myself getting some cardiotoxins in my veins in short order. And if the countermanding orders were rescinded, if you weren't a criminal, I have a daughter now. She can't survive cruel space and is so young she needs me here. Not every kidnapping victim we find has someone to go back to. Not to mention, I looked over those orders. Even presuming that I get a blanket pardon or acquittal, it's still the sort of thing that can and has been used against people viciously in the past. To say nothing of how my returning to Earth will bring the attention back to my family, Demon says. Now if you'll please excuse me, I don't want Leparian to miss reuniting with his aunt. Of course, sorry for holding you up, Observer Wu says and Demon nods before they step into the lift. There is a moment of eye contact between the massive man and Observer Wu. Apparently there's even more bitterness than the man wants to say about the orders from Earth. We're moving out soon, Harold says calmly. Why are you telling me? Your ship is so big that it's not getting out of here at any kind of pace I need to worry about, Velocity replies. She had been sticking around Harold to try and suss out information the way he's been outright divining her own secrets. But the problem is that he's completely open with his origins, intentions, and capabilities, taking all the effort and much of the validity out of the information gained. Because you and yours will no doubt be continuing your observations of us. But Observer Wu just went into the central part of the station to interview all the staff there, meaning he's getting the big bulk of things over with, which means we're leaving soon. Unless something happens to draw his attention for a while, we can expect to depart in less than 24 hours. Yes, we're going to keep following you. Your measure must be taken in full, Velocity tells him and he nods. I know, but the issue is, if can you ship handle it? Octran's spin isn't too far off the trail of Sobin Ride, which is no doubt where you followed us from. The lanes from the Apoc worlds and the Tarlet Republic we skimmed the edges of to get here, are nice and calm compared to the big ones. But the question comes up on whether or not your ship can survive a trip to a distant part of the galaxy. We have at least one more destination right at the edge of wild space, and we will need to go through major axiom lanes at least twice. Can your craft handle it? Our craft is space-worthy. Fuck's sake, woman. I've been polite and haven't gone on to your ship. But I know where it is. It's invisible to the naked eye, but still distorts the stars behind it ever so. We can buy shuttles here twice its size. Is your tiny ship going to be able to survive just how powerful a main galactic laneway is? You clearly have a proper drive on that thing, but the small branch of a laneway we rode this distance is nothing compared to the big ones. We know about axiom laneways. Then you should know that your ship is barely half the safe tonnage to travel on the larger ones. That thing is barely more than a shuttle. It should be used to go from larger ships to a station. There are bigger fighters in common use. I get that you have a stealth craft, but being too small to see is the kind of stealth where you can be killed by accident. And yet clearly you can still see us. Because I have the memories and experience of someone that was trained to a maniacal level by a man who was a legend in his own lifetime. Couple that with the experience that Herbert has that was added to my own after I emerged, and you're going to have to look long and hard for someone better at spotting nonsense than me. Such as me, Isma says from directly above them both. Exactly, Harold says as Velocity looks upward to try and see her, but she's invisible, intangible, and inaudible. Or in other words, very hard to spot. Don't bother, she's playing with us. Velocity looks down after a few moments and considers. I can't exactly trade up for a larger ship, and we don't have the time to wait for a larger vessel to arrive. Your shuttle is small enough to dock in a cargo bay, Harold says, and she goes very, very still. I need to speak with the captain, but it's the safest and most practical way for you to keep up your observations. Did you have to emphasize it like that? She asks. Yes, especially as everything you want to know can be gotten by simple inquiries and not spy work. But we can't trust it if we don't know for certain. I understand that. I really do. Operational security and avoiding a tainting of the data is paramount in any amount of information gathering, be it through scouting, spy work, or any other kind of recon. But you need to have a point where you can trust the information. Otherwise, your paranoia will drive you into circles and stop anything from getting done until it's far, far too late. Information rots, and if you're too busy verifying what you got, then it can rot away in your hands and you'll miss more recent information as well. I'm aware, but I'm a field agent. I don't make those decisions. I understand. Still, if you need to dock your vessel, let me talk to the captain. I'm still trying to figure out why you're so helpful, she says plainly. A trail of allies is more useful than a trail of bodies, and much more so than a trail of enemies. I may not be in the spy work that my brother is, but the training is sticking regardless, and a big part of it was to always make allies wherever you can. If people like you, then they'll look the other way or even do you a favor, and that is more valuable than any tool or trick you can have. So you're doing this in the hope that someday the Vashanian will help you? Call it mutual enlightened self-interest. If I'm known to your people as a helpful and useful person, then they'll be interested in keeping me as such. If I can extend it to the Undaunted as a whole, that pulls us into the galaxy at large, she said with a pinched look on her face. Nothing is truly isolated, no matter how secret or secluded it is. Your people's location is hidden, but clearly the Apok are too close. My people's homeworld is in the depths of cruel space, short of being in the void between galaxies that's as secluded from everything else as you can get. But the galaxy got to us anyways, and if it can get my people, yours won't be much of a challenge, I'm afraid. I know, and so do the higher-ups. It's why they're in a panic about things. Aunt Mabel! Leparian cries out as he squirms in Demon's arms as the massive man carries him over to the quickly rushing up Rabbi's woman. There we are, a happy family reunion, Demon says with a smile. The little fellow jumps into her arms and he nods. Leparian! Oh, Leparian, we were all so worried when those terrible monsters took you. We looked, we really did, but they asked for more than we had or could borrow, and they ran afoul of some other women here. Leparian took that chance to escape and has been making good use of his small size and sticky fingers since. Demon replies as he brings up a small bag. In here are the things we found him in, freshly cleaned. You don't need to worry about the clothes he's wearing, but you'll have to decide what to do with this. He holds out the laser pistol that Leparian had been found with. He's not a bad shot with it, surprisingly. Could use some practice, but so can everyone. A laser pistol? Leparian, where did you find this? Against a scary woman's belt. She grabbed me and I squirmed and fought and grabbed onto it, and it went off, and she jumped and let go, and I ran and I still had it. He explains, and Mabel looks up to Demon, who shrugs. We get so many incidents that such a thing can fall through the cracks easily. He's not in trouble, and honestly, unless it has some kind of identifier to prove it belongs to someone else, I'm inclined to let him keep it. Does it? She asks, and he shakes his head. He's a little young to have a laser. For now, yes, but maybe later? Also, if he had one to begin with, he would have been harder to take, and might have provoked his kidnappers to murder, she says, and Demon nods. True enough, I'm just letting you know it's his. Demon says as she takes the bag with her lower left arm, and then slowly takes the pistol with her lower right. Look, my family and I can't thank you enough for saving him. I know I was on station, but I'm sure you would have found him. I was here to post a local bounty, a price on the head of his kidnappers. I thought he was dead. Tougher little guy than that, Demon says fondly as he reaches over to ruffle Leparian's hair. Thankfully, he's gotten on well with little Kathy. She worked a miracle in calming him down. Sinai, she come over and visit, Leparian asks, and Mabel looks at him oddly. I'm sorry, but who is Kathy? She asks. My adoptive daughter? Not all children found alone on this station have someone to go home to, so I gave her one. Is she a Kruga-Tret Herbid like you? She's an Ikiata. I am a human, although I am about as big as a human can get without some kind of disorder or axiom technique being involved. I see, Mabel says before holding Leparian closer and giving him a kiss on the brow. Well, first off, you're going home before anything is decided. The nightmare is finally over. Best get going then? And Demon says, and Leparian squirms as there's a very slight gurgling sound. Of course, to the large ears of a rabbi's and Demon's well-trained senses, it was quite clear the little boy was hungry. Didn't you feed him? I only had time to get a small snack in him before I found you. Most of his time with me was either sleeping or with Kathy keeping him calm.